All right, so as I was saying, I went to Sylvie, my ex's friend, to ask her if I could talk to my ex, because I want, or, see my ex, or because I wanted my ex just to maybe send me a text message once a month, letting me know that she's okay, or just to let me know that she's alive, or one of her family members just to send me a text message, because I was just afraid that she was going to kill herself, because she wasn't contacting me, and I didn't know if she was dead, so, and like I said, after the abortion, she said she wanted to kill herself. Every time I talked to her, she wanted to kill herself, and that was for 3 months. And then she told me that she didn't want to talk to me anymore about 3 months after the abortion. And then I was very scared she was going to kill herself. So, I asked Sylvie if she could get me in contact with my ex, because my ex, she had ghosted me. And I was very scared she was going to kill herself. But Sylvie told me that the reason why my ex said that she didn't want to talk to me, this is the reason she gave, was that I reminded her of her daughter that she had the abortion, the daughter that she had the abortion with, and she didn't want to see me because it was too much for her, because I reminded her of the daughter. But I was saying, okay, but listen, I'm suffering mentally. I'm scared that she's gonna kill herself. Can you guys, can somebody just text me, get me in contact with my ex, and I just want to know, make it, so I could talk to her, and I just want to make sure that she's okay, and maybe have somebody in her family text me once a month to let me know that my ex that she's not dead, and that she's not gonna kill herself. So then, as I said, but then Sylvie told me that she was a lesbian. For some reason, she told me she's a lesbian. And I asked her, have you ever kissed my ex? And she was like, yeah, I kissed her before. So I was like, okay, why would she tell me that? She's trying to make me jealous or something? And then the next day, because then I said, well, according to Kinsey, almost all women are lesbians. But then she said, no, not all women. And I was like, okay. But then the next day, I texted Sylvie, and I was like, actually they did a study that, it's possible that no woman is completely a lesbian. And then Sylvie got mad at me. And then she told me that the deal was off, or she told Johnny to tell me the deal was off. But then Johnny told me that Sylvie would continue with the deal, that my ex would talk to me in a month if I send her $40, and anytime I send another text, I have to send her $40. So I said, okay. So I sent $40, and I didn't text her the rest of the month. And then at the end of the month, I asked Johnny, is Sylvie, is my ex going to go to the court date? Do I have to go to the restraining order court date? And Johnny told me that he talked to Sylvie, and Sylvie said no, that I don't have to go to the court date. So I don't know if they were trying to trick me, because I went just in case, and my ex was there. So I don't know if my ex was trying to trick me to not go so that she can get a restraining order for her and Sylvie and her whole family. But I went, and then, my ex asked the judge, can I get a restraining order for my mom and my sister and my whole family? And the judge said no. The judge said you can only get a restraining order for you and your daughter. But actually that happened later. So what first happened was I went to the court date, and my ex was there. So I started texting her. I was like, hey, you said that, Sylvie and Johnny, you said that you weren't going to come to the court date. And then I'm texting her. I'm just like, sweetie, please don't do this. It's gonna mess things up. All I care about is that I was texting her, just please stay strong, because I was still scared she was gonna kill herself. Just please stay strong. Please never hurt yourself. But then I was just, I was texting her to just let me, don't get this restraining order. But then when the next court date happened a month later, my ex, showed the judge all the text messages I sent, after the temporary restraining order. So then the judge granted the restraining order, just based off all the text messages I sent. And I talked to my friend Ryan Zelig, and he said I didn't do anything worthy of a restraining order. He said, all you did was you went to your ex's office and said, I'm going to get you fired. You owe me $1,000. And like I said, the only reason why I said that was so if the police came, then I would say, hey, she just owes me $1,000, so then I would have an excuse for why I was there. But he said that I didn't do anything worthy of a restraining order. He said they were not going to grant it, but he said the only reason why they would grant it is because I sent the text messages after the temporary restraining order. You know, and like I said, the first month I didn't. But then, you know, my ex said she was not going to go to the court date, you know, and then she went to the court date, and that's when I started to, so she lied to me. They tried to trick me to not go to the court date so they can get the restraining order. So, you know, I was upset, and I started, but then I couldn't tell the judge this. The judge just granted the restraining order, so I couldn't, you know, fight it. So then, I got the temporary I got the restraining order granted. But then after the restraining order was granted, I never contacted my ex. So this is why I'm saying I never violated the restraining order. But then, like, I think it was like probably like 5 months after this, I was talking to my friend Roger, and I told him, hey, dude, you know, my ex claimed, you know, my ex's friends told me not to go to the restraining order, and she tried to trick me to not go to the court hearing. And I was like, and my friend was like, dude, go to the court clerk and tell her that your ex and her friends tried to trick me to not go to the court hearing. And he said that they will, that, you know, get a trial to dismiss the restraining order, because he said, you know, she tried to trick you to not go to the court hearing. And he said they're gonna dismiss this court hearing. He said they're gonna dismiss the restraining order because she tried to trick me. So I went to the court clerk and I told them what happened, that my ex and her friends tried to trick me to not go to the court hearing. So they gave me papers so I could get a hearing to dismiss the restraining order. So that's when I called up Sylvie and Ajani, and I asked Ajani, hey, can you get me in touch with Sylvie? Because I was going to ask Sylvie if she could because I got the temporary, so I got court order papers for a trial to dismiss the restraining order. So I went to Ajani to ask if he can get me in touch with Sylvie. And he said he can get me in touch with Sylvie if I give him $300. Because he said that he would pay me back in a month. So he gave me a computer, and he gave me $300. When I gave him $300 in exchange for a computer, the computer was collateral. If he didn't give me the $300 back in a month, I keep the computer. So I was going to talk to Sylvie. He got me in touch. He was talking to Sylvie, and he said that he would have me talk to her. But then I sent Sylvie some text messages. I was like, Sylvie, I'm not going to talk about anything. It's just going to be very brief, and I just have some business to talk about. And really, I was just going to talk to her about, can you, deliver the papers to my ex. But then Sylvie didn't respond, and then Johnny told me that she didn't respond because of the text messages I sent her. Because in the text messages I was saying I didn't want to get in trouble, and I just want to, basically I just wanted to deliver the papers. But, but then I tried to get in touch with Johnny to see if he would deliver the papers, but then Johnny wasn't getting back to me. So, and I'm texting both Sylvie and Johnny, hey, I just want to serve you guys to serve some papers to my ex for a trial to dismiss the court hearing or to dismiss the restraining order, but they wouldn't get back to me. So then I went to the sheriff, and I was just going to have the sheriff serve the papers. But then I talked to the sheriff, and the sheriff said, no, it has to be 24 hours after you get the papers, after you get the court order papers, that we can serve it. So you have to either get a professional or you have to have a friend or family member do it. So then I went to the court clerk and I asked them, can I use friends or family members? And the court clerk said, yeah, you could do that. And because I told him, because I went to the professional, and the professional said that I had to pay $150. I didn't want to pay $150. And so then I went to, that's when I went to one of my ex's friend's place, and she wouldn't serve the papers. Then I went to, her parents' place. Like I said, I had never met her parents before. I talked to her dad one time on the phone after the abortion, and I told him, I was like, I'm really suffering a lot. And I told him, I would like to be able to, because he's a psychologist, I was like, I'd like to be able to talk to you because, I'm suffering a lot. I'm going through a lot of pain after the abortion, and maybe you can help me out. But he told me that he wouldn't help me out. And he told me he thought I was mentally ill. And he was basically a jackass to me. He was a jerk to me, So But I went to her mom and dad's place, and I knocked on the door, and all I did was I asked them. I said, hey, I have court order papers. Can you give them to your daughter? For the, dismissing the restraining order or whatever. But they said that they wouldn't do it. So then I left their place and I went to her sister's place. And I asked her, her sister wasn't there, but then I went to her sister's place, but I think I bumped into her husband, who was a Mexican guy. And again, my ex has a Jewish stepdad, so they're into race mixing, so they had like a Mexican, they're married to Mexicans, and even though they're, Italian, but I guess Italian, but so I asked the guy, I was like, hey, can you serve the papers? But, or could you ask your sister if she can serve these papers to my ex? But he said that he didn't know who she was. So but I was hoping, that the parents would just help me out, but again, no one's helping me out. Everyone's treating me like shit. So then, my ex calls, my mom calls me and she says, your ex says that she's going to call the police and you're going to go to jail. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to serve papers. So then, my mom, so I told my mom, no, I'm just trying to serve papers. So then, but apparently my ex went to the police station, and she told the people at the police station. So that, I'll get to this. So then I tried to call, my ex's, boss, because like I said, when my ex was pregnant, I talked to the boss and I asked him if he could help. I talked to both of her bosses. I messaged one of her bosses to ask if she can help get in-home services, and she said no, that they couldn't help me. And I talked to the other boss, and I talked to him in person. I was like, hey, my ex needs to have someone take care of her during the pregnancy. She's on bed rest. She has a cerclage, and she's not talking to me right now. Is it possible that you can get some in-home services, And he gave me his phone number. So I had his phone number. So I called him and I asked him, hey, is it possible I have court order papers for my ex? Can you serve the papers? And then, so I said, no, I called him and I sent the message to him. And then he didn't answer. So then I went to, I looked up her other bosses where she lived. Because I just typed in Beth, or I typed in her name. I'm not going to say her name, but I typed in her name, and it gave me her address. So I just went to her address, and I knocked on the door, and I asked, hey, I have some court order papers for my, and then she was like, oh my God, this is my worker's crazy ex-boyfriend. Ah! And then she's like, I'm calling the police. So then she goes to call the police, and I leave. I just left. It would be nice if just people could treat me with some dignity and respect, but so then, I was gonna probably just I was thinking of just paying the person $150 to have it delivered. But I'd asked my friend Bill if he could serve the papers, and Bill at first said no. He wouldn't do it. But at this point, I told him everything that was going on, and he said, okay, I'll serve the papers. So I had my friend Bill serve the papers, okay? But then, so this is what ends up happening, is my ex, so this happened in January of last year. So then January of this year, I get a paper saying that I violated a restraining order. I was like, no, I didn't, because my ex said, my mom told me that my ex said that she was going to have me go to jail for violating a restraining order. So I called my friend Ryan Zelig, who's a lawyer. And I asked Ryan, I was like, Ryan, did I violate any restraining order? And I told him what I did. I told him I had court-ordered papers for retrial, or for a trial to dismiss the restraining order. And I went to, I asked her friends if they would do it, and I asked the sheriff if he would do it, but he couldn't do it because it was too late. And I asked, another one of her friends, and I asked her parents, and I said, did I violate any restraining order? And he said, no, you didn't violate any restraining order. He said, you should just use a professional, but he said, there's no prosecutor that's going to prosecute this. He said, no prosecutor will prosecute this. He said, you didn't violate any restraining order. He said, all you were doing was trying to serve some papers. Okay. So, but then, like I said, And he said, yeah, he said, so long as you don't have a restraining order against her parents, he said, you can go to her parents' place anytime you want. You can go to her sister's place anytime you want. Okay? So he said no prosecutor's going to prosecute this. So then, but then a year later, I get that letter, and then I go to the court, and I talked to a public defender, and the public defender was like, you violated the restraining order. And I was like, no, I didn't. And she said, yes, you did. And I said, no, I didn't. She said, she said, you served the papers to your ex. You saw your ex. And I said, I didn't. I haven't seen my ex. Because she said that they would give me 3 years probation and 0 jail time. But if I get probation, I can't go to Israel. And that's what I want to do right now, is go to Israel, play basketball, professional basketball. So then the public defender was like, oh, so you're telling me that you haven't seen your ex since the restraining order? And I said, that's true. Yes, I haven't. And she said that she was under the impression that I served the papers, and I personally served the papers, and I saw my ex. And I said, no. So she said, okay, then you have a defense. So then I went to I went to another court hearing later, and the guy was telling me that I should just, probably just get the 3 years probation. But he was like, yeah, he said he's never seen anybody beat, he said he's never seen this was a public defender's assistant. He said he's never seen anybody beat a violation of a restraining order case. But I said, but I didn't violate the restraining order. So he said, okay, well, then we'll see. So then I talked to the public defender again later in the month, and then she says that, you violated the restraining order. I'm like, no, I didn't. She said, you went to her office and you served the papers. I said, no, I didn't. My friend Bill did. And she was like, well, according to your ex, you served the papers. She said, you served them. And she said that her boss is going to testify that I served the papers. And I said, let the boss testify that, because I didn't. She's lying. So then I went to the boss's then I went to see the public defender a different day, and then so she says that according to my ex, I served the papers, and the boss is going to testify, and also that I called her, and that I called her work phone. And I said, I didn't call her. And she said, well, she has evidence that you called her work phone. And I remember the first time she told me that. She told me that on her phone, and I said, well, check my phone records. I never called my ex. So then she showed me a picture of the work phone, and I said, I didn't call. I said, no, I never called her. I said, it's possible that was her boss's work phone. Because like I said, the boss gave me her number when she was pregnant. No, gave me his number when the boss gave me his number when my ex was pregnant, and told me if I ever needed to call him there. So I called him to see if he would serve the papers. But I didn't even know it was his work phone. So the public defender was like, well, possibly your ex is going to say that you were trying to call her. And I was like, no, I was trying to call the boss. And she said, well, there was no message left. So we don't know what you were calling about. But then the next time I see the public defender, like a month later, the public defender was like, okay, yes, I had investigators talk to your ex, and yes, it is true, you did not serve the papers. She thought that I served the papers. She said, and she said that her boss was going to testify, but I told the public defender, yes, because she said the boss is going to testify that I went into her workplace. And I said, yes, I did go into her workplace before the restraining order, so that's what the boss is going to testify about. So the boss thought that I already had the restraining order, but I didn't. And then she was going to say that I served the papers, but I said I didn't. And then the public defender said, oh, also you served the papers, and also you called her at work. But then she said that the investigators found out that I left a message to the boss saying, hey, can you serve the papers? Can we meet? And then, see, my public defender said that I asked, could we meet at your office? No, I said, can we meet at a coffee shop? And can I give you the papers? So this was all based around lies. So then, but my public defender showed me a video of my ex talking to the police, and my ex said, yes, he went into my office and he said he was going to get me fired, and he called my work. So she lied to the police. She tried to manipulate the police to think that I went into her workplace, and she said that her boss would testify, But of course, yes, I did before the restraining order, but she tried to make it seem like I did after. So she was trying to manipulate the police to think that I violated the restraining order, but I didn't.